What's up? I'm Brendan Tollison today, and we're GTM Crossroads with Zach and Harris. How are y'all, man?
Good man. Good to see you in the flesh. We've been it's been a Slack relationship up until now, so I'm pumped.
Yeah, we were slacking too much, so I decided to bring the noise with the orange suit. I just got this neon thing, which I think is pretty cool. Yeah,
Love
I'm not sure how Brendan has done a great job. I think he's hosted two or three or four podcasts now. But getting into this, I know we were talking before the recording about kind of the meta conversation on what is GTM Crossroads, why is there a need for it, what does that mean? It immediately, for me, growing up in the South, evokes images of Robert Johnson and the devil and blues. So there's some stuff there, but if either one of you wants to kind of lean into that and start talking about why we even thought this podcast there was a need for it in the first place, that'd be a good place to start.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. We've done a few episodes, and I think that, there's this, like, everybody knows that the way, especially on the growth side, like, things weren't working. And I think that even applied on the inbound side. I mean, 2 years ago at inbound, you still had some partners being like, well, we're going to do an ebook a month. And you're like, yeah, but I mean, nobody's reading them, right? And you know that. And I know that, and everybody knows that. So, things have really changed a little bit, and it felt like there was room to have a conversation about tactical of like, okay, but like what specifically is different? It felt like there was like, from my perspective, there's this like gap between these like deep clay loom, recorded videos of someone showing this crazy engineering wizardry stuff, and then like these actual conversations with leadership at these growth teams where they're like, look, I know we're landing in spam. I know we're paying a lot of money for all this. I'm not sure exactly what we're supposed to do next. And so it felt like there's room to talk about bridging that gap between the kind of the growth hacking movement and now that it's kind of growing up and we're seeing these mid-market companies adopting these tactics and then now there's like more tooling and things like that kind of filling in these gaps. So that to me was, and I think that's going to be true for a while. I think for a couple of years. I mean, I still talk to companies that are really, really, really early in this process where they're just like, I think our reps are landing in spam. And so they're kind of, 2 years behind the market sort of thing. So that to me was the why it's needed. What do you think, Zach?
Totally agree with that. I think there's like another interesting kind of undercurrent to all of this is like the old playbook, if you will. Like the old playbook was written like when things were progressing and evolving in like a pretty linear fashion, and you have these product development cycles and these 12 and 24 month roadmaps, and like I think another big thing that's changed is like all that is like out the window. It's like if you have a 3 month roadmap that you can stick to, like you are now Nostradamus. Like things with the products are changing so fast. You have so many new competitors, and like the markets are evolving so quickly that it's just like this old like, hey, let's get together at kickoff and like put together the story and then go build like a content marketing calendar around that. Like it just feels almost impossible. It's like you have to kind of almost live everything close to real time, and like that is now just going like, all right, like now in that world, like what does my stack look like when I have to be so much more responsive and quicker and nimble, and like it just I think that's like another thing that's just like the shifting sand underneath all this is just like the product, the I guess the like how dynamic like product development and like the markets are is like causing a lot of this, just like, all right, we need to reinvent the wheel a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that kind of leads into a prompt that I had to discuss. So really good segue. You mentioned, Harris said growth hacking. It seems that it has been hacked, or it was hacked so much that it's now somewhat broken. I know that everything is apparently dead now, but there's also growth sustaining. I don't know if that can be hacked as well. So the concept or the question I have is, how do you adapt strategies as quickly as possible while retaining kind of a narrative or vision or overall value for customers when you just said everything changes seemingly on the weekly. It seems like there's a lot of tools, a lot of best practices that are kind of like kale, right? Kale is is a really fun example because apparently, and I'm not a doctor or anything, but it's like it's not as good for you at all as they used to say. How do you adapt and change and remain agile to keep up with all of the change that's happening?
Oh, I think there's, and I could take some notes from you in terms of like the transparency, even just like down to your personal story. But to me, there's like two stories happening right now. You have the LinkedIn highlight reel. It's all wins. It's like watching, ESPN top 10 plays of the week. But then you have actual WhatsApp conversations and Slack DMs where people are really talking about there's a lot of things aren't working. And to me, that's where all the learning is happening and where all this like hyper iteration is happening is when people can find a space sort of semi-private where they feel comfortable saying, like, in a previous episode, we talked about intent data, and I was like, I tried it for 9 months and I ripped out both of the tools, and I posted about intent data. I posted about it on LinkedIn, and somebody was like, hey, this is, you got to use it the right way. And I was like, how are you using it? And I didn't get any response back. And I'm like, I want to know, I want to use the tool. I want to make money. Show me. And so I think that that's like a piece of the conversation that I hopefully we can do. I think we have, a good openness in the dialogue here in general, where we can talk about stuff that's not working, because it's just too much like one or the other. Either it's like you said, everything's dead, right? Either it's dead or like I'm crushing it, and we just printed like 10 meetings in the last hour, and there's just like nuance. To me, the only thing that's dead is nuance. I feel like nuance is dead, and now it's like everyone's just trying to hack LinkedIn.
Yeah, if I wouldn't be off frame, I would have stood up and given you a standing ovation for that. That's really on point. I guess kind of the follow-up question for Zach is specifically to LinkedIn and being able to ask, are there any other places for that where it's okay as a leader, a CEO, a founder, a thought leader, guru, whatever you want to call them, to like show need? I feel like that's a barrier at times to those honest conversations, specifically publicly, because if you come out and say, we're really struggling with this right now, that reflects poorly on not only yourself, but the brand that you represent.
Yeah. I mean, I guess a couple thoughts. I think one is like, I think there has been this rise of like community, lots of companies are building community, and there's, independent communities developing around different functions. And it could be sales, or it could be, Lenny's podcast around like product management that's like blowing up, and like he's built this incredible audience, and like I think it's really built around like these like super honest, authentic conversations. Like it feels like, I think, again, nuance. Like I think people are starting to like appreciate some of the nuance more of like people saying like, yeah, here's what's working, here's what's great, here's what's not. Like this is effing hard, and we're all dealing with it. And like, when you kind of like own that, I think you get to be a voice that then people go to and trust a bit more. And so like, I think there's less need than maybe in the past to be like, hey, everything's, roses and sunshine. I think people like respond to the more authentic, like, yeah, we're growing, but startups are hard. Half this stuff is broken. It's going to break again. I'm going to make a ton of mistakes. I'm going to make 1,000 mistakes. I need to be right about 5. I think people respond to that. Like they feel that because we all know that's the truth, So I don't know. I might have lost the thread on your question a little bit.
No, you were hitting it pretty well, because the nuance is dead. I'm going to steal that immediately, so hopefully you haven't trademarked it yet. But it seems like the only thing that's either lost or incomplete or dead or whatnot is. You mentioned intent data earlier. I had 2 things. I scrapped them both, and somebody said you weren't using it the right way in this specific situation. So with that, there's an element of being open, being vulnerable, and I'm trying to get to a word, the P word, personalization, right? With AI and with everything else that kind of does stuff for you, I wanted to ask both of you who are pretty close to this, is there a difference in personalization and humanization? And how would you incorporate context into that even further as my tagline, which now I'm jealous because you gave me one. But if it's a token, it's broken. It's like if there's an infographic or demographic or whatever component to it, and you can use a token to insert it, to me, that's personalization. But what I could ask both of you, is there a difference? What does it look like? Like, how do you break through now the personalization buzzword to create those connections that, facilitate the growth of communities, facilitate actual change in conversation? We'll go Zach first, and I can I can re-ask in a much shorter way.
Yeah, there is a difference. I think for a long time, personalization became equated with, yeah, to your point, I got a variable token. Let me go find a bit of data and plug it in. And there wasn't this like, all right, does that really make sense here? It was like being used as this like proof of work of like, I can go acquire data, I can stuff it into a template, and it's ostensibly about you. But like, I don't think that cuts it anymore. And I think there's like, and even in like, I guess we'll call it like Gen 1 of AI, it started to become really easy to be like, all right, let me scrape LinkedIn for the last post that you've posted about anything, and then I'm gonna like glue my value prop onto that. So I'm gonna graft onto that and like call that personalization. And it's like, we've all seen this stuff, and you're repulsed by it. It's worse than just like here's the offer, I can save you 40%. You want to meet, it's like that becomes better in that world. So I think it's like, and I think people have like cooled on that pretty quick. They've realized it doesn't work because it feels, to your point, like it feels in service of trying to personalize it, it becomes inhuman. You're like, no one talks like that. Like no one thinks like that. And so I think, personalization is like, it's this blend of like, how do I be relevant and resonant at the same time? And like, that doesn't always take me knowing, Rob, what you do, where you went to school, but like that doesn't necessarily take that. I can have this tapestry of like your job, your responsibilities, the type of company you're at, and like I can graft on like a pretty strong like a hypothesis is kind of like the spinal column of like where do relevance and resonance like combine? How can I tell a story that like has a hypothesis, has a perspective, like has some tooth to it? Like I think that's like where people are going and people respond to, and it's not about did a person write this. And I think we talked about this in another episode. Like for us, like we talk a lot about like, I don't think people care if a human or AI wrote something, to be honest. I think they just go like, you have my attention for 8 seconds. Is this written for, what was this meant for me or not? And like, that's the goal is like, you just want people to feel like, no, this wasn't a mistake. Like I know who you are. I know what we do. Here's my take on like where we intersect. You up for it? Like that's kind of the gold standard. And then it's not a mystery. It's not a riddle. And then people figure out, yeah, I want to chat, or, hey, guess what? Like that brand is now logged in my brain, and they'll ping me 8 more times and I'll respond to one of them,
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. It's like, why now? Right? Why now? Why me? Why now? I mean, I feel like those are kind of the two things. I do think that what I'm starting to see, in my opinion, is that like, I think a little bit of there's sort of this like became this normal way of communicating, ways of writing sentences, ways of acting on LinkedIn. And I feel like because AI is trained on that to stand out is to not do that. Mm-hmm. And so I'm finding myself getting like more unhinged in the comments on LinkedIn. And not being profane or inappropriate, but like, I mean, if you've ever like replaced a door, I mean, unhinged is one of my favorite terms because I feel like it's like an onomatopoeia. Like, I mean, when like, I don't know the right way to describe it, but like when something is unhinged, like when a door is unhinged, like, it's really unwieldy, right? And so I'm having fun, like using exclamation points, using all caps, using weird inside jokes, and just like really being a person. And I find the same thing is happening sort of on calls and stuff like that. I'm trying to just be myself more and not be this, like what I felt like pressure before to be, you kind of want to fit in, but now it's like, oh, everybody's fitting in. Everybody's like kind of talking the same way and writing emails the same way. And your brain is just like tunes it out, I feel like. And so I think by being, I started posting more memes, but to me, you're the OG of this. I mean, with the Mayor of Inbound thing, I mean, to me, you did this before it was cool in the CRM space. I mean, maybe somebody else was doing it for waffle irons or in some other category in some other space, but nobody was doing it for CRM. So to me, Rob, like you get the credit for that, because I feel like it was pretty I don't know, you're just like, you've just been funny and yourself and personal and talking about stories, and to me that like is incredibly resonant. So I don't know, that's kind of where my head's at on this topic.
The Mayor of Inbound thing was a joke that backfired and is now 3 years and running. I walked into the Inbound conference, long story short, to detract or distract from the very, to me, obvious fact that I did not know very much about HubSpot. I'd only been at Rev Partners for 6 or 7 months. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna need to wear something or have a icebreaker conversation piece. So yeah, the unhinged part, I feel it's almost the beauty of kind of being ignorant and also very curious. A lot of that is just kind of who I am. That you said earlier, nuance is dead if anything is. I also think that formality, as soon as you are exposed to something, is kind of, maybe it's not dead, but it's dying. I don't think it's as requisite as it used to be. And there's this concept of, you mentioned becoming numb to something. Habituation is that, but it's more than just, I think the best example is spraying on cologne or perfume. It's awesome for a minute and then you forget you even have it, but somebody else gets near you and they immediately can kind of pick that up. That's habituation, and it's happening with copy, with different tactics, to where a week ago, a year ago, 5 years ago, they really kind of helped you to stand out and get noticed, and they don't anymore because everybody is trying to get on this train of like, what's the next thing? How should I act? How should I write? How should I type, interact? I'm going to transition very ungracefully to kind of what we talked about before we started recording, in that we talked about the need for GTM Crossroads kind of as a way to talk about this and unearth some of the things in a closed setting and kind of be more, I'm not going to say unhinged necessarily, unless we need it today, but just more open about not only the successes and challenges, but the state of the market. And one of the things that we've talked about here already today is like kind of this evolution of the buyer and trust. Like, we know that people are spending less time in a sales cycle because they're doing their own education. The buyer's journey is, stats kind of vary, but it's like 70 to 85% done by the time somebody reaches out to sales. How has that changed and why? Like, some of the answers I feel like are more obvious with AI and tech and the internet, candidly, but what is the buyer changing and kind of the trust factor? What does that look like in reality? What does that feel like to you guys?
Looks like you're cooking something good, Harris. I'll let you go.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking. I mean, I've been like focusing more on storytelling. To me, it's like it's like, I feel like it used to be more of people talk about like sales process and making them go through things and sign NDAs and sit through demos, and people are just kind of like, okay, like, what are you doing? Like, what's the point? Why are we here? Can you do these couple of things I have? I mean, so to me, I'm trying to like, again, like split of like, it's either a story or it's just really unvarnished, like, this is how the product works and let's get a little technical. And I'm trying to like not be in this middle of, of like, okay, like, how are you communicating with me? I'm trying to move in that direction a little bit with how we think about these things, because like people remember stories, and then, in my opinion, and then they have technical questions. Can you do this? Do you have this feature? Can you support that? In the HubSpot data model, like, how are you doing associations? Like, that's a question with an answer. So I should give you that, but then tied to that, I want to tell you a story about why we're here and why we started this. So, I mean, because to me, yeah, it's like those are the things that people carry on, and then there's like digital tools like sales rooms and stuff like that where they can carry the data forward. But to me, that's like the selling process, and has been my focus when I think about our own go-to-market and how we sell, how I sell. It's just me. So what am I talking about? Me, because I do all our sales and all of our marketing. So if anything's bad, it's my fault. So that's where I've been trying to, like, I tend to think this morning on like storytelling, and I've been thinking about like, okay, what is the story? Like, why are we here? What problem are we solving? Why should you talk to us? Why us versus Make versus Zapier versus rolling it yourself versus building it with ChatGPT? Like, what's the difference? That it's good. Yeah. So you have less time. And so that time you have to either be answering questions or telling a story, is how I've been thinking about it lately. I'm curious what you guys think about that.
I think the The story point really resonates with me. It's funny, like for all like what we were talking about before about like the community and all these conversations are online, blah blah blah. Like I think another one of these like cold email is dead, and it's like salespeople are dead too. It's like there's this like conventional wisdom almost that it's like everyone hates a sales process, everybody hates talking to sales, and it's like yeah, everyone hates being railroaded through a process that doesn't provide them any value, but to your point about storytelling and like there's all this community blah blah whatever out there, a lot of people are still detached from that, and like people want to know like what are other people doing, like what are other people like me doing. It's like I find that's like my sales processes that go the best, like it's like hey, I'm curious about your business and they're curious about like what are you doing with other people. Like why are people buying from you, what are they doing, how are they finding success, and like people do want that, and like they're the human being the storyteller for like the translation layer of like turning like all like AI ain't gonna replace that anytime in our lifetime as far as I'm concerned, and it's like that's what people seem to be really hungry for. And so I think the modern sales process is more just like, yeah, how can you provide value, how can you provide like yeah, trust I guess is implicit, but it's more just like everybody knows there's like risk and software's tough, shit's gonna break, like it's not all gonna work, but like tell me where it's gonna kind of fail, and like I will trust you 1,000 times more. People just like they want to have conversations like that in a honest sales process, and then like those people, the folks where that works on both sides, that ends up being like the best partnerships and your best customers and the people you grow with, and you set the table for like, hey, we're changing too. We need feedback, and I don't know. I feel like, yeah, I'm like in some ways, it's like we're moving into this world of AI, but it's also like encouraging this like return to like, all right, when people are involved, like let's make the most of our time together and be real and useful and valuable, and like it's a good forcing function for that as well, where it becomes more conversations have felt more meaningful in like the last year, I'd say, like than in the last 15 I've been selling for sure. When it was more just that like I'm a transactor of information.
Yeah, I mean, two really good prompts came from listening to that, so shout out. One of them is, I would like to hear some thoughts on yourself as a buyer, right? Like at this point, I feel like most people in a role where they could be a seller had either been a buyer themselves or have needed to. So there's this kind of concept of how not only how are you a good salesperson or how do you facilitate sales effectively, but how do you help sales being a good buyer that sets expectations up front. And part of that, I think, has been ruined by Amazon. Legitimately, the Amazon effect in B2B is like if I want to change the neon, like order a custom RP brand neon sign, I can go to Amazon, type it in, it's at my doorstep, later that day. That is not the same for B2B sales at all. But the expectation is there. Harris is about to start cooking again.
Oh my gosh, dude, I'm chomping at the bit. We have, how do I just want to, we work with growth agencies and growth hackers, and there is like sometimes where they're like, look, like, can you just have an API or whatever? Like we don't, do we even need to talk during onboarding? Like, can we just onboard our clients really quickly? And like, no, you have to ask your customers how they want this data in their system. I'm sorry, like there's no other way. We have to talk to the user about how they're using their system. Are they using the lead object or not? Do they want these kinds of associations or not? Do they want custom contact properties created or not? Do they want the workflows to be managed inside of HubSpot? Like who manages the workflows? Like how are they going to get notified of this? Like there's nuance. There's just nuance. I'm like, we have to talk about it, and the user has to tell us. And there's just no way around it. They have a business process. This is an important system of record for them. And we just have to talk about how it's being done. There's no like quick prompt. There's no like VA we can hand this to. There's no API call I can create to substitute the fact that we have to have a conversation about how their business runs so that we can get them this data in the right way. And then we will potentially reveal problems. And that's kind of where like the RPs of the world come in and are like, hey, like, by the way, like you don't have a sales process. We should do that. We should build that. But it's like, yeah, there's not a quick and easy answer. And like, I can't just like hallucinate an answer for them of like, we should do it like this, like a GPT would be like, well, we should just write it to this record. It's like, no, they need to decide that, and like, well, can't you do it for us? I'm like, no, I can't, there's no control. There's no you can't just, we're a software company. You can't just give me super admin seat in one of your clients' HubSpot accounts. And so, and it's not like coming from a bad place or malicious or anything, but I find myself genuinely like, I don't know how to talk about this. I'm not sure how to explain, but it's like the old medieval maps. Like there's dragons over there. I don't know how else to say it, but like we have to talk about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's part of the context that's missing, right? Is the nuance, because there's so many, I don't know if it's infinite, but it's one of those numbers with the E and the other exponent. So many different variations for all the different possibilities of how they could be using it, what the use case is, what they do or don't have involved. And so Zach, I'll throw you this one that came out of this, because I think it's intended to give a reaction, and I don't mean this in any bad way if it gets clipped weird, but I am starting to think more and more. Yeah, I'm setting myself up for failure here. I'm starting to think more and more that this concept of the future of sales is marketing, and the future of marketing is customer success. And I mean that from the perspective of, if people are educating themselves on their own time asynchronously and don't need you, then you better make sure they're educated in the right way, and you have lots of content or whatever it is available to them. In the same way, whenever you do go to Amazon or you do enter a buying process for whatever, don't you check reviews and social proof and all that first, or at least at some point, to make sure of their context and like how it went, how they felt about it? So just throwing that out there, Zach, what do you think about that as a concept?
I dig that. I think like that as a trend line, I'm totally behind. I will say, and kind of like, to tie in like what Harris was saying a second ago, it's like you'll get these questions, and it's like, do you integrate with HubSpot? Do you integrate with Salesforce? And it's like, what does that even mean? It's like, it's so vast, and it's like, I do think there are, again, how do I say it in a nice way? Like, there are people who think they're informing themselves, but like, they're just scratching the surface. And like, I guess you were asking before this, Rob, of like, as buyers, it's like, I love a good sales process. Like when Harris was rattling off those questions, like, hey, who's going to own this? What about the workflow? Blah, blah, blah. And like, when you go through a sales and like somebody's asking you good discovery questions, and you're just like, oh man, like I haven't thought this through. Like they're helping me, and it's like, that is I'm with you. Like we're definitely going towards like people, they've gotten themselves further down the track, but like I still think it's very if we're talking about anything of like magnitude and it's got some gravity, if you're buying a widget, make it easy as pie, but like if something has some like, we're gonna make an investment here, it's like, I think it's still pretty hard to get to those like next level things. And I think us as organizations selling, we got to make it easy and be accessible and transparent and provide lots of resources and lots of like, we hopefully can be your, Sherpa in a really light touch manner to get somewhere. But then like the smart people that are going to make a bet, they know like, all right, I don't know all the right questions to ask. And then how do you bring them into a process that feels not like a interrogation and I'm doing BANT and MedPick on you, but like, hey, let's figure out if there's a fit here, and here's some things you should go get the answers to for yourself. Like, I want to know them too, so I can help, but you should figure this stuff out too.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, regardless of whether we work together or not, whether it's a fit or not, you should be thinking about this kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's, I started in sales before RP. I was in sales at RP, and I'm not in any way saying sales is not needed. I know some people are kind of moving there with like, oh, AI can do your job for you. It's more, to me, specifically in software and in things that require more scoping, is like the human in the loop is a it is there. I watched Chernobyl recently, so this is coming from that angle a little bit. But it's like it's meant for like critical risk mitigation. So all of the lower touch things that can be like, if there's a typo, there's something off here, it's not really necessary. The more critical risk, which would be, Harris, you were talking about the integration question, and like there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. If they don't know or care, there's a ton more risk in doing it incorrectly. So the
Yes.
human or humans or pod, whatever, the sales person and delivery for what we do has moved into the sales process. I know
Yeah.
Salesforce is kind of doing this same thing, which, the one thing they've ever gotten right is like bringing SEs into like AE roles because they know it's going to require that scoping and the word of the day, the nuance, the context that goes along with it. Yeah, to me, it's an interesting observation that the more almost the less time that you spend in sales process, right? So if the buyer's journey is 85-90% of the way done by the time they reach out, that last 10% needs to be transformative
Yeah.
or uncover something like really super specific that shows value. That to me, I don't know how that works with efficiency or like building the playbooks for that, but it requires a human to still be in that seat.
Yeah. Can I ask you guys a question? Tell me what you think. I've been thinking about like forcing 2 calls during our sales process. I've been like, listen, during this first one, I'm going to ask you some questions, and then I'll give you like a preview of the product. But in the second one, I'll give you a demo that shows you exactly what. And whatever, we can talk about pricing whenever you want. I can show you the product whenever I want. I'm not trying to hide pricing or hide the demo, but like I need to ask you some questions, and then we need to have a second conversation where we talk about like specifically. I can show you how to do those things. Do you guys think that's a good idea or a bad idea, or because I find like in the one calls like we don't have enough to like hook onto. Like it's just 30 minutes is not enough time, and then in my follow-ups I feel like I'm like trying to like keep the ball rolling, but it feels like I don't have like stuff to hold on to, stuff to follow up on, and be like, listen, like, are you willing to commit to 2 30-minute calls with me?
Yeah.
And we can get on the calendar, and you can cancel the second one, or you can even leave this first one early if you really don't like me.
Yeah.
But what do you guys think about like asking for a little more up front?
Love it.
Because I feel like the intuitive thing is like, oh, like ask for less, shrink more, try to make it tighter, try to make it smaller. But it's like, what if it's the other way? What if you try to be more demanding? What do you think?
I love it. I think like thoughtful friction in a process, like thoughtful friction that doesn't feel like I'm deliberately trying to like torture us and like fill out my manager's checklist for our sales process. But like, yeah, I'm asking for some commitment and some time, and it's gonna, if you're serious, this is what it takes. And like, great way to disqualify people too. If they can't sign up for a second 30 minutes, then like, guess what? Like this thing's got a pretty low probability of like getting done anyways. So like, I think it's a good filter for that. And like, we honestly, this isn't exactly what you're saying. Like in our product, as an example, like we have a self-serve kind of onboarding that'll get you some % of the way. And like, we have some questions in those that like we make you answer. And like, we, honest to God, like we see a ton of people drop off. Like it is friction, and they got, like I'm done. I've spent my 2 minutes already. I'm not going to spend the last 30 seconds, but it's like, we know for the people that like, they spend that last 30 seconds and like answer these 2 questions, we give them a way better output. And like their first aha moment is going to be that much better. So not exactly what you're saying, but like, I think there is that, like the thoughtful friction. I'd say yes. And one.
I love the term thoughtful friction, and I would +1 this just by equating it to the almost a triage mindset. It's like if you go to the doctor, whether it's for an emergency or preventative care, there is a nurse or a generalist that evaluates you first to see, oh, your stomach hurt. They don't just write you a prescription for Phenergan or whatever. You could have something far more serious, or you could like. That concept is requisite. I think it would help to DQ people that weren't serious buyers. And then the 30-minute second concept, obviously they can cancel or leave the first call early, but it kind of validates how serious they are. It also serves to show the nuance that you're talking about. It's like explaining that briefly and well. 30 minutes is just to kind of get to know each other, figure out the use case. I am not going to interrogate you. Like this won't be rapid fire, 50 questions in 30 minutes. Therefore, so that I can present some of the stuff or show you how we would solve it, I'm asking for a second 30-minute call. Do that, more concisely. But yeah, I love the concept.
Okay. Yeah, because it's hard. Because like founder led, it's messy, and I'm so used to like doing whatever. Like, what's the price? Well, what do you need the price to be? I can change the price. I can change the features. I can make engineering finish this. And it's like we're growing now, and we've got some mojo. It's like got to get out of that. So I feel like I'm the one who actually needs to be restrained, and I need to sell like I were a salesperson. Because if I tried to hire somebody to do whatever the hell it is that I'm doing, when it comes to selling, they would fail spectacularly. Because like how it's not a job. It's just like a improv. I'm just like making it up. And so like I feel like I've got to get myself out of that, and then ask more of them, and then force them to like be like, listen, like we're gonna have to get into the details here. There's no other way for me to promise you that we can help you succeed.
Yeah, do you want this to be successful? Yes or no? If yes, then I cannot provide the level of care that I expect from myself and our business without doing another 30-minute call. Zach, somebody was about to jump in, I think.
Oh, no. I think that was...
Could have been the FedEx guy. Could have been a lot of things.
I mean, I feel like a SaaS company maybe wouldn't normally do that, right? Because we're a software company. I feel like maybe a services company would be more obvious to do that. But it's like, if we want to keep churn down, I don't know. I mean that second 30-minute call, if it saves our CSM like 4 hours, kind of worth it, right?
Totally.
I was leaning in this direction. I know we have only a couple minutes left, but there's two. I'll address this quickly and then give Brendan the handoff for an excellent episode next week if he comes back. But it's like, how do you position stuff in marketing and sales to almost prepare the customers for retention and expansion? I think you guys both know the math of it's more valuable. It's cheaper to keep a customer. It's more valuable to upgrade and expand into account. So there's that. We've talked about past today. We've talked about present, current state. We haven't talked about the future much. So as kind of a fun sign off, I'd like to introduce a new segment called Nostradamus or Nostradamus. Give me a prediction on trends that we'll see in the next 6 months or this year.
Anything? We talking sales?
Yeah, it could be buyers, it could be sales, it could be demand or demand generation or brand. Anything that we haven't talked about yet. I feel like both of you have been sitting on some stuff and cooking, so this is your chance to make a bold prediction.
I'll go short and sweet, and I don't think this is like too unique of a thought, but like I think like brand is coming back. I think there's been a over reliance on like tech and process and like everything as a science experiment, and I think like again counterintuitively, I think as we're veering hard into AI automation world, people want brand, things they can trust, they want to talk to people. Like I think we'll be seeing more investments in that area would be my prediction.
I think you're right. Harris, can you top that?
Ooh, I don't know if I can top it, but because I agree. And yeah, I mean, like these in-person things, like events, I feel like are picking up more. People are like inviting people out and doing these interesting dinners and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. And it's, again, like counterintuitive because it's not measurable at all. It's not AI at all. But like Chili Piper has that Chili Palooza event. And I've seen some interesting posts about that. And I've wondered like, oh, it seemed like it was fun, to go to that. But I think for me, I think I've referenced this maybe once in the past briefly, but I think that over the next, let's just say a couple of years, but moving forward, I think there will be fewer people in go-to-market org with more spend per person. I think the GTM engineer and like, oh, we're hiring for a new GTM engineer, but I think like in general, there's going to be a compression of headcount, and I think you'll see fewer people. And then the people that are left are going to be doing much more human things. I mean, we're seeing this now with people rolling out our product, and then the reps are on the phone like way more. And so the like sort of semi-technical data stuff they were doing before, trying to play around with filters and zoom in phone stuff, that's just being taken out of their hands, and it's being done by someone else within the org. And then the person that's in the role is doing much more human stuff. So I think I think there will be a reduction in headcount over time in go-to-market orgs. And my guess is my theory would be that if I want to double down on it, I think that instead you'll see growth in customer success and more people being put on the customer success side. I don't think like maybe mass layoffs or whatever. I just think like the average organization 12 months from now will have fewer people under a sales like function and more under a success type function.
I love both of those. I agree with the second one. more so just because of the tagline thing I just introduced, where sales is becoming more marketing and awareness education.
Yes.
And then, yeah, so that fits in pretty nicely. Gentlemen, it was a pleasure. Hopefully I filled in nobly in Brendan's stead. He should be back on the 12th.
Who needs him now?
Yeah,
I mean,
coup d'etat. I'm already anticipating the comments section. The mayor seized power.
bring him back. It'll be like this for whenever they see it. It's like, I've got an idea. You should hire the mayor full time. So we can do that. Someone will see both of you next week. I'm going to end this real quick.